Maria, and today I thought I would share with you my contribution to the Seamstress Tag. I was tagged by Isabel from Fluffy Fibers, and basically the Seamstress Tag is a series of questions to introduce yourself to the sewing community. So I'll just go ahead and start. Like I said, my name's Maria and I am 27 years old. I live in Stockholm, Sweden with my now husband, Thomas, and we live in a small apartment in the city. I work as a research assistant full-time, and I have just finished my Master's of Medical Science in Public Health Epidemiology. And I did that at the Karolinska Institute, which is a large medical university here. I moved to Sweden almost 4 years ago to live with Thomas, and I studied Swedish when I first moved here, and then did my 2 years master's program that I finished this spring. But originally I'm from Boulder, Colorado, where I grew up and lived for around 18 years, and then went away to university in Washington State at the University of Puget Sound. I started really being interested in sewing, I would say, farther back than I can remember. But I guess I've always been interested in making things, and that sometimes included sewing. But my true interest in sewing started while I was studying at Puget Sound, and suddenly I had an urge to make a quilt. And so I didn't have a sewing machine, but I decided to hand piece a quilt. I was actually able to borrow one of my sweet mate's sewing machines that he randomly had. I really have no idea why he had it, but I used that to do the quilting part and to sew on the binding of my first quilt, which was kind of a mess, but I still like it, and I gave it to my mom. I also was really interested in knitting, or I became really interested in knitting during college, and I did that a lot with my two close friends during school. One of the first things that I wanted to sew was project bags for knitting, and since I didn't have a sewing machine, I actually sewed a few project bags by hand, which now seems a little bit crazy considering how fast you can do that on the sewing machine and how long it took me to sew project bags with zippers by hand, but it was still fun, and kind of slowed down the whole process, so I didn't make as many mistakes as I think you can when you're first starting out. I still made mistakes. Anyway, so I became interested in garment sewing and more interested in fit, I would say, pretty recently. When I turned 21, my parents gave me a sewing machine for my birthday, which was something that I had requested. When I moved to Sweden 4 years ago, Thomas gave me a sewing machine for Valentine's Day, and I have been using that to mostly make garments. I've made one quilt on that machine ever since. And just this fall, I recently purchased a serger, which I have been enjoying getting to know, and bringing a whole different level to my sewing now. I think my favorite make and my proudest make are probably different. My favorite make, like many people, is the last thing that I made, so my most recent project usually. I really wear this Blackwood cardigan quite often. I have one in black and also one in a nice kind of dusty rose color. But yeah, this is definitely a wardrobe staple. So my favorite makes are those that make a regular rotation in my closet. And my proudest make is the wedding dress that I sewed for my friend recently, who got married in August this year. It was a two-piece wedding dress. The top was a lace overlay that she wore over a store-bought bodice type thing. The bottom part was a flowy silk skirt that had a rather thick waistband that she wore with this lace top tucked into it, and then up the back of the lace top there were little silk covered buttons that ran all the way down the back and then also onto the back of the skirt. So that is definitely my proudest make, because I just had the feeling of watching her come into the church wearing that dress is something that I don't know if I will ever experience again, unless maybe I make somebody else's wedding dress. But it was really something special to really put in a lot of hard work and effort and have it pay off, and just in the end see how happy she was on her wedding day and how beautiful she looked in her dress. So it was a labor of love, and it was not a quick project, but it's definitely one that I'm very proud of. I don't know if I can put my finger on one particular disastrous make. Currently it is my Kelly anorak. I wouldn't say that it's a super disaster, but it's just a little bit disappointing right now, because I realize that I have quite broad shoulders that are forward rolling, and I have almost finished a Kelly anorak that just isn't going to fit because the shoulders are too tight. So that's really sad. But luckily I haven't installed all the hardware, so I'm planning on trying to salvage what I can from that coat, and I have some new fabric to cut out a new one and get started on that hopefully pretty soon. Luckily the fabric for the Kelly that I made and didn't fit was a really inexpensive waterproof fabric that I got on fabric.com. And I was able to find another very inexpensive waterproof fabric on sale in my local fabric shop. So I'm not too worried about supply loss, I guess. But it is just disappointing to have spent so long cutting out all those pieces and sewing it all together, and it's just not gonna work. Yes, I could have done a muslin, but I didn't. My favorite place to go fabric shopping to look at fabrics is Fancy Tiger Crafts in Denver, Colorado. I don't usually end up buying a lot of fabric while I'm there, but I'm really inspired by that store. I tend to buy most of my fabrics online. I don't have a favorite shop. I would really like to open a fabric shop actually in Stockholm, but I'm not sure how realistic that is in the near future. I'm hoping though that might be a possibility at some point. And in my fabric shop I would have the main focus be on apparel fabric and not so much quilting cotton, which a lot of fabric stores I find are. I enjoy buying fabric from some online UK retailers like Sew Over It and Cloth Mill, Fabric Godmother, and a few others that I can't think of off the top of my head. I don't tend to repeat patterns all that often when I'm sewing, but I guess since I have two Blackwood cardigans, that's probably my most used pattern. I would say that and the Monetta dress are probably tied. The Monetta from Colette. I would say they're also my most used patterns because I can definitely see them being used in the future. My most dreaded sewing task is cutting out the fabric. I used to not like piecing PDFs together, but I've kind of gotten over that. Now I just really don't enjoy cutting fabric. And for me, it's because I have to do that on the floor because I don't have a table which is large enough to cut out fabric on. So it means spending quite a bit of time curled up in an uncomfortable position on the floor and cutting out the fabric. I also dislike unpicking a lot. My favorite sewing task is sewing itself. I really like the process of putting the fabric through the machine, and for me it's just really meditative, and I also enjoy the finished product of sewing. So I guess that's not really a sewing task in itself, but it's sort of part of the process, just as cutting the fabric is. It's like when you fold it to the right side out for the last time and see the finished thing finally come together. It's a very satisfying feeling. I do watch and listen to quite a few sewing and knitting podcasts and video podcasts or vlogs. And I also tend to listen to the radio. I listen to National Public Radio usually. Sometimes I listen to music. Sometimes I can't listen to anything, especially if I'm going through trying to understand some pattern instructions or go through sort of complicated steps on a pattern, putting something together. But in general, I do like to have something on in the background. I also like to listen to true crime podcasts and just general podcasts that are on NPR, like Planet Money and How I Made This, stuff like that. I quite enjoy a PDF pattern. I don't particularly like pasting it all together, but I've kind of gotten over that recently because I really enjoy the ease of being able to print it out directly, but also to know that I can just cut out a size, and if it turns out that that's not the size I want to make the next time that I make it, I can just print out another version without having to worry about that I've like cut the printed pattern if you get it in like a printed folder. Printed patterns, I don't know. I also really like printed patterns, but I'm hesitant to cut into them, so I usually end up tracing them, and I feel like tracing printed patterns is, for me, similarly laborious as pasting together a PDF and cutting out the right size. So I would say I'm more of a PDF kind of girl. I have a Janome Sewist, Janome Hild, actually, it's called in Swedish. I forgot about that. I think it's the same as the Janome Sewist 125 or 15. No, it's either 125S or 525S. I'm not sure. But in the Nordic countries, they have a different branding method, and they call it the Janome Hild, and it has a little floral pattern on it. I also have a Janome 9300DX, and that's the serger that I got really recently. And those are the two machines I have here. In Colorado, I also have a Janome My Style 100, which was the sewing machine that I got from my parents when I turned 21. And I really enjoy having a sewing machine in both countries because I often go back to Colorado, or when I go back to Colorado, it's either usually during the summer or over Christmas, and it's nice to be able to have a sewing machine there in case there's anything I want to make while I'm there. So yeah, this time when I was back in Colorado for my wedding in September, I made some bags, little purses, out of waxed canvas for my bridesmaids. So it was really convenient to have my sewing machine waiting for me there at my parents' house. yes, my main hobby, as I've mentioned, is knitting. I also enjoy a lot of other crafty things in general. I've always liked making things. I cook every day. I don't know that it's particularly a hobby. Sometimes I enjoy it more than others. I enjoy bread making, and I'm planning on getting my sourdough starter up and running again after throwing away my last one after it was severely neglected. I also have done cross-stitching in the past, and in high school I did a lot of watercolor painting, and in my whole life I've actually done a lot of art, that kind of things. I've done journaling or more like scrapbooking, I would say, not journaling in particular. A little bit of wool felting. I have spun in the past as well. I actually made my own spinning wheel once upon a time with my dad's help, and I think that's still in their basement. But yeah, that's a little bit about me, and I would like to tag Rachel and Tabby. Rachel is a Hey Rachel Makes on Instagram, and Tabby is Awesome Socks, and they are sisters who host the Hey Sister podcast. So if you would like to join, I would love to hear more about your making and sewing journey with the Seamstress Tag. So that's all for now, and you're welcome to join me over at the Stitched in Sweden podcast if you're interested more in what I'm making and doing.